EZGTR.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Sindel, and welcome to EZGTR's Learning to Play Bach's Cello Suite, and this is lesson number 6. As always, if you haven't already joined the newsletter, I invite you to come up to EZGTR.com. There you can sign up for the newsletter, download the PDF score, print it, and study along note for note. Alright, it's been a while, and we should definitely do a few things before we get started here. And I got to really thank a couple sponsors before we get the ball rolling. I want to thank GraphTech for coming on board. They supplied me with a brand new Resomax bridge for my guitar here. It's totally awesome. Of course, Peterson tuners. We got MXL and Mogami with cables and microphones, GHS, Rocktron, all kinds of great sponsors. Check them out at the end credits. We only have 1 or 2 more segments left, and then we've crossed the finish line. Because today's lesson is fairly challenging, I want to make this as simple and easy for you as all possible. So make sure you've printed the score. We're working with page 4, bars 29 to bars 33. I've gone ahead and prepared a little slideshow for you, so go ahead and check this out. I'm going to help you dissect what we're going to do today, and I'll come right back and help you with this with the guitar. For today's lesson, we'll look at bars 29 to the middle of bar 33. And hopefully you've already downloaded the score and printed out the page. This is page 4. Now the 2 phrases we'll learn today are highlighted in yellow and the second one highlighted in blue. And to make things easier for you, let's go ahead and dissect the first phrase highlighted in yellow. We'll take this and we'll actually break it down into smaller ideas or melodic phrases. Isolating the first little group, right after the fermata in bar 29, we've got a grouping of 7 16th notes. Now if you notice, the last note of the 7-note phrase here is actually the first note of the new grouping of 16th notes in the middle of the bar. Which of course, if you know how to read music, that first note of the next grouping of 16th notes is a D note. There on the A string on the 5th fret. Moving on to our second phrase, you can see that the first note, which is a C note, starts on the second note of the actual grouping of 16th notes and carries over to the first note of the first grouping of 16th notes in measure 30. And this is an 8-note phrase. And moving on to our next grouping, you can see that we have an 8-note phrase. Once again, the first note is the actual second note of the grouping of 16th notes, which is a B note, which descends all the way down to its lower octave from the G string 4th fret all the way down to the 2nd fret of the A string. And our last grouping of 8 notes, as you can see, follows the same idea. The first note is actually the second note of the system of 4 16th notes, starting on an A note on the 2nd fret of the G string, descending down to the 5th fret of the low E string. And to complete our first phrase, which is highlighted in yellow, all we have left is this little 3-note system of 16th notes starting from the G, making its way down to the E note. And let's go ahead and continue studying the score. Let's look at the second phrase highlighted in the blue area, and let's break this down real quick for you. As you can see, we're starting now on the second grouping of 16th notes in measure 31, and we continue down to the middle of bar 33. And if you look carefully, we're just going to be now working with groups of 4 16th notes. And let's go ahead and break this down even further for you to simplify things. What we're going to do now is isolate this whole entire region into little phrases of 2 notes, or 2 16th note ideas, as you can see. Hopefully this simplifies matters, as this is probably one of the more trickier parts of the entire score. So by me going to these great lengths of creating these stills for you and breaking them down into little sections should help you get through this challenging part. Okay, cool. I hope that little slideshow helped you along. Now let's look at bar 29. And the first note, in theory, is really the second note of that measure. It's where we got the C note and it ties to the B note. So what we do is we play the C, come down to the B, then the next 4 notes is actually the second grouping of 16th notes right there. We got A, G, F sharp, E, then the last note is D. And that D note is actually the first note of the third system of bar 29. You got that brand new grouping of 4 16th notes. The phrase, very cleverly and strangely enough, ends on that first note of the next grouping. So we got 7 notes. C, B, A, G, F sharp, E, D. And what you need to do is play them as legato as possible. Which means you're going to be doing a lot of pull-offs. So just practice it. The more you do it, the better you get. Okay, let's look at the second grouping now of bar 29. Now we're going to look at a little phrase with 8 notes. The first note will now be actually the second note of the third system, where we've got the 4 16th notes tied together. So the first note is C, then goes down to B, then goes down to A. Then we're going to play the last system of 16th notes there in the measure. We got 4 notes, G, F sharp, E, D. Then the last note actually goes over to bar 30, where we play the C note. Which, of course, once again, to follow this phrasing idea, the last note is the first note of the next system of tied together notes. I know it's kind of weird, but this is just how it is. That's why we're slowing this down and trying to break it down for you guys. So let's look at it again. The first note is C, B, A, G, F sharp, E, D, then C, which is the first note of bar 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And try and make it as legato as possible. It's all about interpretation. However you can play it is cool, but the smoother you can play it, the better. Alright, we're doing great. So let's move forward to the next grouping of 8 notes. Now we're into measure 30, starting on the second note of the first system of 16th notes. That's right. I know it's a lot there, but that's what we're doing here. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to start on the B note, come down to the A, then to the G. Now we're working with the second system of 16th notes. We have 4 notes tied together. We have F sharp, E, D, C, and then we're coming down to the lower B. So we've successfully went from a B octave, a higher B up on the G string, to a B down on the A string. B, A, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B. 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And of course, try and make them as legato as possible. Alright, let's move on to the end of bar 30 here. We're going to work with the next little grouping of 8 notes, which actually carries over to the first note of measure 31. We're going to be working with a set of A octaves. We're going to start on the G string, which is, of course, the second note of the third system of 16th notes. We got A, G, F sharp, then we come to the last grouping of 16th notes of measure 30. We have E, D, C, B. Now we come all the way over to measure 31, the next line down, and we play the A note there. And you can play it open A if you want. I prefer the 5th fret of the low E. So here we go. A, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool. Now let's finish this actual phrase 1. We're in the slideshow, we highlighted it in yellow. All we have left are these next little 3 notes, which are the last 3 of the first system of the 4 16th notes that are tied together in measure 31. And if you follow that, you're a hero. Okay, so the last 3 notes just say G, F sharp to E. So there you have it. I'll just do a fast review of what we just talked about. That ties together the 8-note phrase with the 3 notes. So in reality, you could put them together and count 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Cool. So that finishes phrase 1. Good job, guys. We'll take a fast break and we'll come back and do phrase 2. Okay, guys. We just took a little quick break and now let's get back to the action. Now the second part of this guitar lesson is much easier than the first part, thankfully. The first part was pretty tricky, just like I told you. Just go, work slow. Work at each little section, just like I talked about in the slideshow when we broke it down. You'll have it. Just work for it and play as legato as possible. Remember that. Now let's move on. The next section is really simple. In the slideshow I highlighted it blue, but now let's just go ahead and look at the score. Once again, we're in measure 31. We're working with the second system of 16th notes. Now if we dissect this, the easiest thing to actually think about is when we look at this system of 16th notes, we're just going to break it up into little groups of 2 notes. So if we have the second system of 16th notes here, the first 2 notes are F sharp to A. Then our next 2 notes are D to A. So that would sound like this. As long as you think of it in groups of 2, you'll be alright. Now if you notice there's a pattern here, there is a pattern. Our first finger, which is the second note, we play F sharp. That A note, if you look straight across the score, you'll see that A note is consistent. That's an upper pedal tone. We're going to be ping-ponging off that note through the rest of this run for the most part. So it's kind of cool. You play a note, you come back to this note. So it makes it pretty easy. So once again, our first little system says F sharp A, then D, A. Now let's actually go to the second system of this phrase. In reality, it's the third system of 16th notes of measure 31. Now the next note is E, then to A, then to F sharp to A. So that sounds like this. So the first system sounded like this. Now the second system. Now let's go to the third system, which is the last system, the fourth system of measure 31, where we have a G to an A note, then E to an A. I'll go ahead and review that for you. Much easier. Now let's move on to measure 32. Alright, bar 32, we're in the home stretch, we're almost finished. Now let's look at the first grouping of 16th notes. Remember, we're breaking this down into groups of 2. Our first 2 notes are F sharp to A, then D to A. Let's go ahead and look at our second system of 16th notes. Our first 2 notes are G to A, then E to A. Let's go ahead and look at our third system. Our first two notes are F sharp to A, then D to A. Remember that pedal tone idea, we're always ping-ponging back to that A note. And our fourth system of bar 32 says G to A, then E to A. So I'll play it slow and I'll do a review of bar 32. Alright, bar 33. We're at the tail end of our phrase. Let's look at the first two notes of the first system of 16th notes. And our first two notes, of course, are F sharp to A, then D to A. And our last grouping here, which ends the run, says E to A, then F sharp to A. So a little quick review of the two systems of bar 33 sound like this. Very cool. What I'll do is a very fast review for you of what we just did of the second phrase here from bars 31 to bars 33. Starting with the second system of 16th notes, of course, where the phrase starts. I'll play it at a mild to medium tempo here for you. And there you have it. We got through one of the more challenging runs here. Very awesome lesson. Thanks guys for hanging in there. Check the credits at the end. Say hi to the sponsors. It's all good, and we'll see you soon.